All right, let's just wrap this thing up. So the third part of the Roth tutorial, I'm going to skip the drop targets one right now. Implementation is difficult. It's worth doing. It can be done. But I'm just not great enough at scripting to make it of any value to anybody. If you follow the tutorial, you'll do fine. But for 3, basically you're just looking at a series of physics values that you want to match, starting with table physics and moving down to materials. And that's just kind of exploring how a table was built, seeing what things are collidable, and then matching them to the type of material they are. So you start with your playfield physics, and I have these set at the recommended values. The friction can go up and down depending on how you want the game to play, but 0.2 feels pretty good. And then, one of the nice things is you can set your variables for slope. And, something like taxi was probably set up between 5.5 and 6 typically. So you got to play around with that too and see what you like. Greater slope means the ball moves faster, but you get less side-to-side motion. So if something's playing too easy, sometimes increasing the slope isn't the answer. Sometimes you want to decrease the slope, see if you can force the ball a little bit more into the out lanes, left and right. Something that visual pinball physics do not do to the level of difficulty as real pinball, even with these rubber dampeners. I think that's one of the biggest differences, and one of the reasons visual pinball plays typically easier than real pinball. But now we're into the weeds, and I should just shut up and get to work here. So basically we're going to explore a little bit and see how this was built. We can kind of go by element. So let's start with drop targets. So we've got standard visual pinball drop targets on here. So we're just going to select the 3. And then we're going to get rid of this overwrite material settings. We're going to use one of these presets. We're going to use drop target. Okay, and we're going to get rid of legacy mode. We want them to behave a little more accurately. Okay, so for now, drop targets are done. Next, we'll go find things that are made out of metal. And this is always fun to track down. A lot of times that's walls. Sometimes that will be meshes. It looks like we all have all of our ramps here. Just trying to see how this table is organized. Lights, inserts. So it looks like maybe our collidable walls are here. So you can kind of just pick a spot to start from. This is all wood. It does help to have a reference image. Your apron is metal, so there's a good place to start. One way to cheat sometimes is to find your collection manager and see if there's a collection with metals. That would be triggering sounds. That's a good indicator. It looks like none of the metals are set up to make sound in this game. So that's something that you would want to fix with the Fleep Sounds tutorial, and somebody else can do that one. One thing you do want to do, though, is when you're doing these, you want to make sure hit event is set for all of these. So if you do end up adding sounds, that the sound will actually be triggered. If hit event is not checked, you won't get a sound, even if it's in a collection that indicates a sound should be made. So we're just going to kind of slowly go through and look at these. So it's a ramp, but that looks like a metal wall. I'm not going to do this all on camera here, but you get the idea. And, metal and metal IFO, so that's metal with some fall off on it. That is kind of the amount of give that the metal will have. So a post that's in the playfield really solid or has a solid base, you might leave as metal. But IFO, something that's sticking up out of the playfield that might have just a little bit of give when a ball hits it, like a metal ball guide, they're only attached incrementally to the playfield. then you'd give it a little bit of fall off. So we had to kind of tune in your physics a little bit. All right, so we'll just pretend I finished all the metals, and then we'll go to plastics, anything made out of plastic that the ball hits. In the case of taxi, the only place would be the sides of the top ball guides here. So we would want to grab all three of these. And it just makes sense when you have them all selected. Yeah, see, the dumb thing in Visual Pinball too. You right click and you don't always get to keep them all selected. That time I did. You would, these don't need to be in getting a sound call for pins. Let's give them a sound call for plastics. So you might as well do that too while you have them all selected. But we're given those plastics. So all these values are coming from the tutorial, and they're sort of tuned to each other. If you just did some of the things here and not the others, things would be out of balance. These values were tested and made because they work nicely together, kind of as a whole. So here's a ramp. So I moved over to the ramps now just because I'm going down the list. And so got metal ramp here. You can create a hit event if you want. There are other good ways to add metal ramp sounds though. And then plastic ramps, we would find kind of all of these. And a lot of these are in pieces. Some of them are walls. And so you have to select your ramps. You can select your ramps together, but you can't select ramps and walls at the same time. So you could do all the physics stuff for all the ramps like that, and then go in and do all the walls like that. Okay, and rubber bands we did already, rubber pegs and rubber posts. We did those already, the sleeves, stand-up targets. Let's see, what does this game have for stand-up targets? I don't remember. Are there any? There's one. So we'll do that. And then wood. So kind of these outer rails here. And then those, more or less make the sound of, maybe rubber posts. Okay. So that's really all there is to it. You just kind of go through methodically, buy material, find all the instances of that, change it over. And then, the nice thing is that then those are all assigned by material. So if you want to make changes, all you have to do is go to your material manager and you say, boy, the metals here just are not bouncing as much as I think they should. And so then, you change your value, globally for everything with that material. So long term, that's a nice thing to have set up. So then we have, bumpers and recommended force is 9.5 to 10.5. I like them tuned up a little more than that. I think one of the things that Visual Pinball doesn't do is add kind of this backward ball spin that balls get when they hit a bumper. And so I like to add just a little bit of English to make bumpers as dangerous as they actually are on a real table. So I tend to ride these a little bit on the higher side. It's another thing too is if you're a table operator, you have one in your basement. I mean, you can adjust the strength of the coils. You can adjust the way that your bumpers are set up to be more or less strong. And so that's one of those things that as a table operator you get to pick, and same deal in Visual Pinball. You tune it to how you like. Threshold here, I think we want to be a little lower. The lower the threshold for the slingshot to actually fire, the more dangerous they feel. I like games to feel dangerous. And you can set these on a real machine so that the gap on the leaf switches is really tight. So, even something like 1.6 I think is cool. And slingshot force at 5 is fine, but these are a little bit like the bumpers, like slings and bumpers are really dangerous parts of the game, and if a game's playing too easy, you're getting scores that you wouldn't get on a real game. Maybe goose those a little bit. And then maybe just another short word about slingshots. You can see right here that the slingshot is getting triggered kind of immediately at the end. And I think there's some taper to how sensitive these are. But I actually tend to drag these out a little bit. Because if the leaf switch is here, a ball that lands here isn't going to trigger the slingshot. So I tend to give just a little bit of extra distance here from the posts. Because the sling just wouldn't trigger there. So that's what I do. See how much you like that idea. And then gates, I don't know. We could moan about gates a little bit too. Let's see if I can find one. I don't necessarily think the animation on them is very accurate, and for one-way gates, they don't stick out the way that they're supposed to, so you can use a mesh instead. But the guide says 625 and 0.3 for friction, and that's fine. And then I think some of this has more to do with how it's animated. You can play with those values as you want. But it's just sort of a methodical walkthrough to make sure all the elements are kind of balanced against each other. And then, off you go. There are fine-tuning, physics things you can do, like adding a playfield mesh that will give you some bevel around the holes. Taxi especially. You can rim out on this shot a lot. I mean, you can miss and miss and miss. So having a full-size kicker, and kickers just grab so binary-like in VP. So, a smaller kicker along with a playfield mesh that has a bevel here so a ball might get close and swing out like it would in real life can be beneficial, but that's a totally other project. So hopefully that helps. That's a nice short one. This is kind of the easy one. So once the other stuff is up and working, then going through and doing this is a breeze. So there you go.